ready? I'm just going to do a very brief introduction.
Sure, I'm ready.
Okay. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for a virtual exploration of the spring skies based on Northeastern Indigenous culture and traditions. We're grateful to the Board of Trustees of Amagansett Free Library, to our director, Lauren Nichols, and to our co-host, Hamptons Observatory. I especially want to thank Observatory Executive Director Donna McCormick and historian Sandy Brewster Walker for helping us along the way and for helping us to publicize this event. It's a privilege to introduce Mandy Jackson of the Turtle Clan, Montaukett Indian Nation, and William Francis Taylor of Hamptons Observatory. Ms. Jackson is an advocate for the Montaukett people, a dynamic and gifted discussion leader of the Montaukett Women's Circle, and has served on the Suffolk County Native American Advisory Board. And William Francis Taylor is a NASA Solar System Ambassador and Hamptons Observatory's senior educator with a capacious mind and a terrific teaching manner. Everyone in the audience will be muted during this presentation, but please do type your questions into the chat box or any comments that you would like to make, and I'll do my best to read them aloud at the end of the presentation. Mandy's going to start the evening off showing her slideshow and doing her narration, and then William will talk about the astronomy, and they're sharing the event. So I'm very excited and I can't wait to hear what you have to say, Mandy. Thank you. Thank you both for all the effort you put into this evening.
Well, Jackie, thank you. Pumbasha Kisawik, Nitishaya Montaukett Nichipaya Santa Baknotak. Good evening, greetings, welcome, and I'm so honored and happy to be here this evening with everyone. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to share some ideas and to learn more about the stars and constellations in the Northeastern Indigenous culture and tradition. My name is Mandy Miller Jackson of the Turtle Clan and the Montaukett tribe. I was born in Copiague, and I'm a member of the Women's Circle, and also extremely honored to be here hosting this event with all of you, as well as with Mr. William Francis Taylor of the Hamptons Observatory. So let's get started this evening. We're happy that you have decided to join us. And I have a brief PowerPoint to show you, and William and I will collaborate and work together as we move through this information, exploring the spring sky. The Northeastern Native American perspective came about because we wanted to explore this facet based on the Northeastern perspective of the sky. There's lots of information about our Southern brothers and sisters and those in the West and the South and other parts of Indian country. This particular presentation will focus on our Northeastern area. I want to thank the Amagansett Free Library and the Hamptons Observatory for this opportunity to share this information with you. It's really wonderful to be here with everyone. So let's get started exploring the spring sky, a Northeastern Native American perspective. Here is the area that primarily I'll be talking about this evening. You can see it's our Indian country based in the Atlantic Ocean and the Long Island Sound, primarily from Montauk, which is east of Shinnecock Bay, all the way to Hempstead Bay and north to Connecticut. So you see that the New York area is also in the northeastern part of our land area here. But just to give you an idea of where we're going to be speaking about tonight, I thought I would show this particular pictorial. Now, the constellation stars and sky and other areas of our astronomy and our area in the air is very significant to indigenous cultures, as you know. And tradition in the Northeast is no different. It's deeply based in the universal nature and rich and life areas of animals, plants, weather, earth, sky, water, fire, and the seasons, all of which we believe are rich and alive with various symbolisms. And here we see some pictorials here of clams, the turtle, eagle, whaling, and the deer. Now, in many cultures around the world, we also see the same sky, as in people in China or parts of Africa or other far reaches of the globe. However, we have, in addition to that area, the northeastern end of the South Fork of Long Island, in which the land narrows to form a low sandy area called Nepakog, and the Algonquin word meaning for waterland. Eastward from Nepakog, the hills rise up to command the horizon. This is Montauk. So our area would be a little bit different than the geographical area of a land-based people. Seasons and times. We are coastal peoples with a common root. Indigenous communities share many cultural characteristics that are in common beliefs with their neighbors all along the northeastern Atlantic coast. So up and down the northeastern coast, we can see similar attributes and things that we focus on in our indigenous culture. And William, can you tell us a little bit about the longitude area of the geographical area that we're talking about tonight?
For sure, yeah. So we live on the 41st parallel on Long Island. Further north, there are similar other indigenous people related to the Shinnecock people and other people of Long Island, other Algonquin people, all along the East Coast. But when we think about the astronomy that we're going to be talking about tonight, we'll be focusing on what we can see from the New York area, from Long Island. So it'll be very local.
And that'll be great too, because Williams identified some actual sky that pertains to May 3rd, which is tonight. So we'll see in real time what's going on in the sky. The Montauketts and their neighbors had values and assumptions that were in sharp contrast with those beliefs held by Europeans who began arriving in the 16th century in the area of governance, gender roles, property, and religion. The Native American culture emphasizes communal values and spiritual harmony with nature. European culture at that time believed that the land was theirs by natural right because only they could harness the natural resources and make the land productive. They believed they had a God-given right to make the land produce. And this is documented by many researchers who have studied this particular area. So what is the sky really telling us? There are sidereal days, solar days, astronomical twilights, nautical twilights, and delays in sunset time, resulting in the sun's movement from east to west. And here we have a pictorial of a pre-dawn sky and a sunset sky, in which you can still see stars and planets and different objects. William, can you just describe for us a little bit of information about the difference between the sidereal day, solar day, and some of these twilights? Because there's actually a time difference, although in our area, it's not that significant. There is a time difference in these areas.
Sure. So the sidereal day refers to how long it takes a star to revolve around the Earth from our point of view, or how we should say how long it takes the Earth to turn around its axis. In the same time that the Earth turns once, the sun also seems to move a little bit in the sky. So there's a little bit of a mismatch between the way the stars move and the suns move, which makes the constellations change throughout the seasons, so that we see certain constellations in the spring, we see certain constellations in the summer, fall, and winter, and so forth. With regard to twilight, there's different kinds of twilight, but generally about a half hour after the sun sets, you can start to see some stars. A half hour after that, you'll be able to see a lot more. So sometimes people go out right after sunset and don't see too much, but if you wait out to later in the night, you'll see a whole lot more.
Thank you, William. Appreciate that very much. The next slide that we're going to see is going to describe a geoid. A geoid is simply a picture of the Earth. And the reason I wanted to show this particular picture is because depending upon where you are on the Earth, that will determine your time, your seasons, your sky view, your night sky, your day sky, and different things that are happening in your area. With regard to water, the tides, and other significant food sources, travel, it impacts us greatly. This is called a geoid, all right? So one important thing is water. Montaukett areas are impacted and northeastern coast areas are impacted by water. Long Island specifically is surrounded by water on 3 sides. The tides also have a significant impact on fishing, water resources, and the use of our oceans and the environment. On May 10th at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the moon will arrive at its closest point to the Earth. There's a pedigree distance of 222,200 miles. A little over 9 hours later, the moon will officially turn full and undergo a total eclipse. And that's going to happen in May. The near coincidence of the full moon with a perigee will still set a dramatically long range of high and low ocean tides. Any coastal storm at sea around this time will almost certainly aggravate coastal flooding problems, such as an extreme tide known as a perigean spring tide. The word spring being derived from the German spring, to spring up, not reference to the spring season. And you can see that some of this research has led us to the idea that there are cultural differences in what is going on in the same geoid. So from the perspective of a European perspective versus a Indigenous or Native American perspective, we are going to talk about that a little bit more, if that's okay. So this particular talk is going to be from the spring sky, because we know about the various seasons that we have throughout the year, but there's so much, and the research is so vast on those areas. We're focusing on the spring. So let's get together and understand some basic concepts and terms so that we can move forward with the information. Now, a spring sky has a few terms and concepts that I want us to understand. And that's one of the goals of this talk that I would appreciate us coming away with. There are some terms that were founded and grounded in the Roman and the Greek lexicon. And these words are posted here on the PowerPoint: galaxy, constellations, asterisms, nebulas, meteors, stars, the moon, and of course, I know this sounds kind of basic for some of the people who are very fluent in the area of astronomy, but I know there are some people in our audience who are just starting out and fledgling people that want to learn more about it. So I'm going to basically touch on some of these topics, and William, you can help out too, because the European perspective of looking at the galaxy and looking at the sky is a little bit different in some cases than the indigenous view, all right, at least at one time. This perspective that we have today is very finite, and they can determine exactly where things are in a precise and precision way, especially using devices such as a telescope, or we're going to see a program called Stellarium that William is going to talk about more. And even an evening sky map. There are documents that you can look up online at skymap.com, and it will tell you all the things that are going on in the sky for that particular month. This area that I selected for the sky map was the Northern Hemisphere for May of 2021, and it'll outline all of the sky activity that's going on there. The other reason I wanted to bring this up is because in the Roman and Greek mythology, their terminology for some of the things that we see with our naked eye. And primarily a lot of what I'm talking about will be with our naked eye that we can see with our eyes without any instruments in most cases. I wanted to just make sure that we start out on the same terminology and from the same footing. And William, if I say something that is a little bit contrary or different, just chime in and make that correction. So we'll start with galaxies. This is an example of what a galaxy is. This is a barred spiral galaxy, approximately 15 million light years away from the Earth. So the galaxy is one of the largest aspects of the sky. And you can see it's lit up with all kinds of, what would you say these are, William? Planets, stars, gases in this galaxy?
Well, actually, when the galaxy itself that we're looking at, which is one that you can see in the springtime, called M83, you can see lots of billions of stars, too many to actually individually see. You can see a lot of the pink nebulas that float between them, which are clouds or stars of born. And in the distance behind that, you can even see other galaxies. As far as you go, they're just galaxies and galaxies and galaxies. And each of them has about 100 billion to 1 trillion stars in it.
And Messier, can you tell us a little background on that? There's a story behind that as well.
Sure. Messier was a French astronomer who made a catalog of things in the night sky that he discovered. He lived in the 1700s. As he discovered them with his telescope, he made a catalog because he wanted to keep track of them. And these happen to be some of the brightest galaxies, nebulas, and things like that in the night sky. Thank you.
So you can see that French are involved, Germans are involved, and we're going to learn more about this as well. Lyra 1 constellation is a double star, meaning that each of its 2 stars is a double star as well. It's about 6,500 light years away in the Eagle Nebula. So there's a bright star, and then there's a companion star that also creates a double star in this constellation. And can you tell us why you believe Lyra is a good spring constellation to look at, William?
Sure, of course. Yeah, Lyra is a constellation that rises in the spring, late spring, in the summer. In the summer, it will be right over our heads. In the meantime, it's rising in the northeast, usually May evenings. To the ancient Greeks, it was a lyre, which is a kind of instrument. But a lot of other people around the world have seen something more like a buzzard or a vulture. And not only the people of the Middle East saw a vulture, but also the Luiseño people who are indigenous to California would see a buzzard in the night sky there too.
Mm-hmm. The next one we're going to observe is an Orion Nebula. So now we're moving from constellations and galaxies to nebulas. And here's an example of an Orion Nebula. It's really beautiful. It's a cloud of gas and dust in outer space visible in the night sky. A nebula is located in a constellation visible from late autumn to early spring. All nebulae are bigger than our sun and other stars. So this is the Orion Nebula. Incredible when you see it. And I'm not sure if anyone's seen it like this before, but I'm not sure if you know that it's this colorful, an Orion Nebula. And I'm sure you may have heard of the term in the galaxy Orion or Orion's belt. This is an Orion Nebula. And moving forward, we're going to make our way to the moon. Now we know that moons wane and wax, and they're full and they're new. And it's important that we know that the moon is special and has a gravitational pull to it. This is an example of a full moon and of a waning moon. Moons impact our planet, they impact the tide, they impact other things that happen as well. Can you tell us a little bit of the significance about the moon that we see here, William?
Sure. A moment. Yeah. So here you can see, well, just 2 different phases of it. It looks to me like you've got the full moon here on the left, and you've got, hard to tell, maybe the waxing moon on the right. Waxing and waning just mean growing and shrinking. But I'm not such an expert in the moon, although I have a little moon globe back here to help me learn some of the features of the moon. But yeah, so yeah, we're all kind of familiar with how the moon changes throughout the seasons. For people like us who just like to go out and look at the stars, one little secret is that the full moon is not the best time to do this, because it's so bright and it's beautiful, but it blocks the view of all the other stars that we want to see. So right now we've got a waning moon outside. If you go out late in the night, you'll see it. So it's a great time to do stargazing.
Yeah, and full moon this month is on May 26th. I think we're expecting a full moon. We talked about, right?
I believe
All
so.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the Earth's moon. The next thing we'll talk about is the planet. Okay. There are different types of planets. We know there's lots of planets. Venus is an example of a planet. It's visible low in the east-northeast, which is why I put this slide up here. And when we look at the sky, there's things that are impacting us now as we look at the sky. One of them is light pollution. And William, can you explain what light pollution is?
So light pollution is a phenomenon that we're kind of blinded with now in 21st century, where lights from all different kinds of sources, houses, shopping centers, streets, and things like that, put up a lot of extra light into the sky that block the view of the sky that we want to see.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we all deal with.
Right. Years ago, with less lights and different types of cities, and we would have a much darker sky on Long Island. And you could see a lot more, I believe, in the evening sky and the night sky, not as much light pollution. Mars is also important. It's one of the 5 planets that can be seen without a telescope. At times, it appears as a very bright star tinged with red. Mars can be seen in the hours just after sunset in the evening from January 1st through August 22nd. And this particular planet is significant because there was an exciting adventure which took place recently on Mars. And let's hear a little bit more about that, Mr. Taylor.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, I believe that what you're referring to is the Perseverance rover.
Yes,
just landed on Mars. A really exciting rover that is exploring the planet. It's one of the it's probably the most incredible robot ever yet sent to Mars, and so we're seeing pictures from that every day.
Yeah, and I think they just had a helicopter and also a rover and some other items. Some people returned from space, I think, yesterday as well.
Yeah, yeah. In addition to the rover on Mars, there's also astronauts in space too, and they're currently visiting the International Space Station. I believe that some came back yesterday.
Okay, good. So let's talk a little bit now that we have those concepts together. Well, let's just back up one here when we talk about the planets. So we talked about different things, galaxies, nebulae, planets, the moon, and other things that we see in the sky. So when you see the astrological signs, those are depictions of what various cultures believed those particular constellations or clusters or groups of stars meant. So you can have the same stars and you'll see constellations in the sky that refer to Leo or other areas in the constellations. Those are just cultural differences that various peoples have to identify what those particular objects in the sky mean to them. So let's find out what some of those things meant to us. Some of the things that we believed in our culture was that plants and vegetables, you should plant vegetables on a moonlit night so that the seeds mature and grow better. Climbing vegetables like cucumbers should be planted when the moon is waning. You have those vegetables that are underground that appear to grow best when the moon is full. And then you have, of course, this is an example of the 3 sisters, the corn, the beans, and the squash, in which climbing vegetables can be planted when the moon again is waning. So there may be other cultures or other ways of determining what's best in agriculture, but this is not the only way, but this is one way. The other thing that impacts us is are our coastal tides. Let's take a look at the horseshoe crab on the coast of Long Island. This particular animal has been in existence over 400 million years, and they still come to the shores of Long Island seasonally to mate and to grow and to feed. And this, I'm not sure if you remember, but you could see these all along the south shore of Long Island. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you know about the horseshoe crab, William?
Well,
And coastal tides.
I know in particular that they love to come up on the high tides, and the highest possible tides are when the moon is full or when the moon is new. In other words, when you can't see the moon. But those are the two times when the moon's tidal energy and the sun's tidal energy combines to make the biggest possible tides for us. And of course, on the full moon, it's easiest to see the horseshoe crab. So in May and June, it's a wonderful time to go down to the beach on the full moon nights and to try to look for them. Because they are incredible when they swarm up on the beach in pursuit of each other.
Yeah. Thank you. So now we're going to see a constellation called Lyra. And this is an example of the Lyra constellation. You can see the bright star here, and it forms almost a rectangle here where they connect. This is called Lyra. We talked about that earlier with Lyra 1. This is also a Lyrid, one of the oldest recorded meteor showers according to some historical Chinese texts. The shower was seen over 250, I should say 2,500 years ago. The most recent Lyrid took place April 22nd of this year. So as you can see, here's a meteor shower taking place. And it's actually wonderful to see. Now, in Native American law, folklore, we would see these particular showers and anticipate certain events that would come. Sometimes spiritual events, sometimes ceremonial events, sometimes just different events. But we knew that even though these meteor showers took place, that the earth would still be okay. That was the general concept, that you would see these events occur, but then that the world and the earth would be okay and safe. Another cluster is the Beehive Cluster. And can you tell us a little bit about what we see here, William, in the Beehive Cluster? There's a cluster of stars.
Sure, this is a cluster that you can see with your eyes without any special equipment on spring evenings. If you go out and you look for the constellation Leo, and you look slightly to the right of it, there's a very dim constellation called Cancer, the crab. And in the middle of this constellation is this fuzzy spot called the Beehive Cluster. But if you get your binoculars out and you take a look, you'll see hundreds of stars, just like in this picture. And in clusters, stars live very close together, unlike our sun, which is all by itself.
And moving forward, the spring stars are basically gas and dust in the night sky. These are some of the different types of stars: Regulus, Arcturus, Vega, Polaris. These are identified here as, and let's take a look closely. One of the brightest stars, one of the brightest stars that we have in the sky, that's Leo, and it's blue. So which one of these four stars do you think is Leo? And if you look at the blue one, this is Leo. That's the star Leo. Arcturus, the brightest in the northern sky, and it's orange. We can clearly see that this one is orange, so we know that's Arcturus. And William, this is Bootes. We pronounce this
Bootes, I think.
Bootes, that's Latin of Bootes. Thank you. Vega is the second brightest in the northern sky, and that's in the constellation of Lyra, and that's a white-blue sort of star. So then we could see this is the white-blue star, and very, very hot. The stars are different colors, and the radiation and the heat that comes from these stars really impacts how we can see them at night, and can also help us locate where these stars are. Vega, the second brightest in the northern sky, again, is in the Lyrid constellation. That's the white blue. Polaris, close to the northern celestial pole. It's in the Ursa Minor constellation, and it's yellow. Here's our Polaris. And why is the color of the star important? The blue is the hottest, the white is next, the yellow, the orange, and then the red. It would help us identify our location. So here's Polaris, and it's in the northern celestial pole. Some people call it the North Pole. I'm not, William, you can clarify that, but I know that it's in the northern celestial pole of that particular galaxy. Let's focus in on Polaris then. Polaris, again, it's close to the northern celestial pole, but we can see all these stars without a telescope at night. Here's Polaris. You want to describe this to us and why this is important, William?
Sure, of course. So this is Polaris, also known as the Northern Star. It's very special for those of us who live on Earth because it's always in the north, it's always in the same spot. And unlike all the other stars and planets, it doesn't seem to move in the night sky, it just always stays in the same spot. So if you do learn about astronomy, one of the first things you'll probably learn is how to find this star, because through the knowledge of the star, you can navigate the world so much more easily. This is a wonderful recent picture of Polaris that showcases a lot of the interstellar dust that surrounds this star and most other stars as well.
Thank you. So now we're going to look at Sirius Betlegeuse. That's what that's called, right? It has an estimated radius of about 887 to 955 times that of the sun, and is one of the largest stars that can be seen without binoculars. This was observed by the Hubble Space Telescope. It's the second brightest star in the Orion constellation. It was marking the eastern shoulder of the Hunter. So again, we learned about a Lyra before, and this is of a Hunter. Scientists believe this star will eventually explode into a supernova. And tell us a little bit about Betelgeuse.
Oh, sure. Betelgeuse is one of the most wonderful stars in the sky because, well, we can only really see it in the winter, but in May we can still see it just before it sets, right in the evening. So this is your last chance to see it for a couple months. What is interesting about Betelgeuse is that last year it faded considerably for a long number of months, and so this really bright star became very dim compared to what it normally is. So stars change over time, over the course of months or years, and that's one of the fascinating things about astronomy, seeing these new and strange things happening in the sky.
Yeah, and so that's kind of amazing. We're moving on to Sirius A and B. Sirius A and B, this is a binary star. That means that there's a main star and then there's a dwarf star. So we can see the main star here, then there's a dwarf star, and it's the brightest star in the night sky. So if you look up and you see Sirius A and B, they're in the Canis Major constellation. So this is what Sirius looks like. Next, we're going to go on to one I enjoy, the Pleiades cluster. And William, we'll get ready to talk about that a little bit. Here's an example of a Pleiades cluster. And we can see this in the night sky as well. This is so exciting. All right, tell us a little bit about this one too.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this is one of the most beautiful clusters in the sky. It's called the Seven Sisters, as well as the Pleiades and lots of other names from around the world. It's most prominent in the fall sky. So we may have to wait a few months before to see it again, but in the summer, in the early mornings, it'll start to appear again. And it's always one of the great markers of when the seasons are changing, because when you get to see the Pleiades again in the morning, you know that a seasonal change is coming. So yes, a lot of cultures have made close mark of this one.
And that helped us tremendously in our Native American culture here in the Northeast, because what we wanted to see was Pleiades leaving, because that determined when the frost may be over. All right, so once Pleiades was waning and on its way out, it was good to plant, and good chance that in the northeast section of the country, 45 degrees north latitude of the equator, that it was okay to plant. And that's important because you want your seeds to germinate properly. You want your plants to grow and to thrive. And you want to make sure that you have enough food to take care of your families and to take care of your people. So when we look at Pleiades, we want to see that leaving, because it leaves, and we know come May, it's okay to plant. You might take a chance and want to do something in April, and your seeds may freeze. Your vegetables may freeze, and that's not a good thing. So we have between May and October, we know is a good time for sowing and for harvesting. And Pleiades, we would see that on the way out. Finally, we have Earth's sun. The Earth's sun is a yellow star, and we found out that this is not the largest star that we see up in our solar system. And when we look up at the sky, the Earth is a yellow star, which means that it's not even the hottest star, because your blue and your white stars are hotter than the Earth star. But this is our star, and it's Earth's sun. Okay, very important that we have our sun and we appreciate our sun. But the sun is also important in the spiritual aspect and the growing aspect and the thriving and living in nature aspect amongst indigenous and other people and cultures around the world. It's important that we are able to, in the Northeast, have the days that we have of heat and life and growth and nature and warmth. There is something that we believe that's bigger than the sun and the moon, which are very important in our culture when it comes to giving thanks for things that we so much appreciate that the earth has provided for us. But this sun is critical to determining travel as well, and also many other factors in our indigenous culture in the Northeast. So here we have our sky. The blue sky is sunlight scattered by the Earth's atmosphere. And this is what our sky and some of the water and things around our Earth, this is what it looks like when we look up, well, I should say when space travel and people who are looking at our Earth from out in our atmosphere see our Earth. So here at this point, I'm going to read a little legend to you about some lore. And this involves, and you may have heard it before, it was a tale reported by the Long Island Indians and the Mohegan Pequot and published as an Iroquois story by Smith in 1883. And it's called Lore and Legend, The Winged Head. The legend goes that one night, a widow sat at her wigwam, and in a little fire near the door, she was roasting acorns and taking them from the burning embers and eating them for her evening meal. In the doorway appeared a winged head. She did not see him. He watched what she was doing and grinned. Then the ghost stealthily reached out one of his claw-like hands and snatched some small coals from the fire and thrust them into his mouth, thinking that was the widow, that's what the widow was eating. With an awful howl of pain, he rushed out of the wigwam, disappeared across the plains, and neither he nor his like was ever seen again. So this is an example of Indian lore, which may have occurred over a period of time. And there's lots of different lores that are in our culture. So now let's talk a minute, just a brief minute, about some of those lores and some of those cultures that we have learned about or know about. And I know some of you are familiar with some of these lores as well. When to plant, when to dig for your clams, what to take medicinally, whether it's the medicine through plants, or what to do when things ail you, putting tobacco inside your tooth to stop a toothache, for example. Some of these things will pass down from generation to generation. I know my father told me a lot of stories about how to capture eels and when's the best time to fish for different fish out in the Great South Bay. What happens in various seasons and how to identify markers in a cemetery using the sun as your marker, where the sun rays is, how high up in the sky the sun is at certain types of day will delineate exactly where the markers are for my grandparents and my mom. And we don't need a watch or a clock or anything like that to find that. There are also other legends as well in various constellations. One of them is, I think, the Big Dipper, and William will talk a little bit more about that. And in Orion, one of the brightest stars, they talk about the hunter in Greek mythology and other Roman testaments of asterisms. And asterisms, like the Big Dipper, are prominent groups of stars that form patterns, but are smaller than a part of a constellation. We also talked about International Astronomical Union, the Lunar and Planetary Institute. We did some research with NASA, and there was a wind recording I was going to play and ask you if you could tell the difference. I think I did that with some of you. Played the recording of a wind recording, and it was actually the rover moving on Mars. It sounded just like the wind. And that was pretty interesting. The gravity in water, we really didn't, you feel gravity. There's also laws around when babies are born, when the moon is full, or in different cultures in Europe, talk about the annual cycles and the impacts on constellations and when they rise, the impact of the moon. We have lots of things that we could talk about. We talked about the solar day. There are also various planetariums and sky maps that we can learn from as well. We leave paths and to remember where you've been so that you can forage and garden and forest and move your crops around so that your soil is good and so that it prospers. What to do under normal atmospheric conditions and zero elevations. We talked about it as well. So we're going to look a little bit at the classical sky right now, and then I'll come back and tell you some additional stories about some of the legends and the lore that you might have heard or experienced in the Northeast indigenous people amongst on the East Coast and in upper Northeast hemisphere. A classical view of the night sky. We have ancient European astronomers from the 1500s and 1600s, and in 1930s, the astronomers divided the sky into 88 sectors, each with a constellation. We also have H.A. Ray's interpretation of classical constellations and Latin and English names for constellations, according to Dorcas Miller in her book. She sets out a lot of these wonderful ideas. We're looking at our time now, and we're at 7:46. So William, if you would like to show us some of the constellations on the stellarium and some information there, we would really enjoy that.
Okay, I'd be happy to. Well, thank you so much, Mandy. It's been so great to get to know you over the past couple of weeks while we've been working on this. It's been so great to hear from you tonight and to learn from your scholarship and all your perspectives on astronomy and nature and on indigenous cultures on Long Island. So before I talk, I'd just also like to thank the Amagansett Library for hosting us tonight, and for everyone who came here, of course. Now, I work for the Hamptons Observatory, and our mission is to further just people's awareness of the night sky in every possible way. So part of that involves astronomers doing research in space, and part of it involves people's different cultural perspectives and history of the night sky. Mandy, if you don't mind just stopping the share on your screen, I can go into Stellarium. And
okay. And if you'll talk about the two stories that we mentioned before, I think they would.
I'd be so happy to. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome. Okay.
Thank you. So yeah, Mandy mentioned two stories. So let me try to share them with you. So again, this is if you all can see it, hopefully it's just a view of the night sky on this evening, May 3rd, at different times in the evening. And so this is the springtime sky. So some of the things that we mentioned, like Orion, are starting to set over the horizon. The planet Mars is still visible, and the evening sky is the only planet you can really see right now. But let's take a look to a constellation that most of us have seen, or at least have heard about. Among most people in the United States today, we call it the Big Dipper. So that's these 7 stars right here, and I'll zoom in on them a bit. Here you see it a little bit upside down from the way it's usually drawn. That's the way it looks in the night sky in springtime. Here's the bowl and here's the handle. But there are, of course, so many different ways to see this constellation. And every culture around the world has come up with its own stories. So in North America alone, there were hundreds and hundreds of different cultural groups, and they all had different languages and different star stories, different ethno-astronomical traditions. But let's take a look at one particular group who are called the Mi'kmaq, who live on the Atlantic coast in what is nowadays Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island and places like that in Eastern Canada. Like the ancient Greeks, who called this constellation the Great Bear, Ursa Major, the Mi'kmaq people also saw a bear, but the way that they saw it was in this sense. So this is the paw of the bear, the front paw. And this is the hind paw of the bear. Here's the head of the bear, and so every night throughout the seasons, the bear advances a little bit. And the reason is that the bear, these 4 stars, is being pursued by a chain of hunters. So the hunters have the names of different birds. So here is the robin, here is the chickadee, and the chickadee is the organizer of this hunt, the smallest bird, but the most vivacious. And the chickadee is carrying a pot on its back in order to catch the bear's fat and grease to cook. The chickadee, being a very small little bird, is hiding between the robin to the front of it and the moose bird behind it. Moose bird is also known as the Canada jay or the gray jay. And then there's another chain of stars that go beyond what we call the Big Dipper to include other stars here, such as the pigeon, which is actually a passenger pigeon, which is currently extinct, sadly, since 1900. And then another star, which is called the blue jay. And then following down, there's a really bright star, brilliant star, that the Mi'kmaq people called the Great Owl. The ancient Greeks called the star Arcturus, which means the bear driver. So this star is seen as pushing the bear forward. But according to the Mi'kmaq story, this is the great horned owl, and this is the saw-whet owl, which is a smaller kind of owl. So all these birds, these 7 birds, are 7 hunters traveling after the bear night after night. And this story starts off in the springtime when these animals have been fasting for the whole winter, are hungry, and so they're chasing this great bear through the sky. And if you go out every night, you will see these stars moving like this. And let me show you a broader perspective. What we're looking towards is the north. So in the north, you see that one star we mentioned earlier, Polaris, which never moves, where all the other stars whirl around it. And then as we move into the summer seasons, the hunters start to catch up with the bear, who is now rearing up on her hind paws to defend herself. But as the seasons go by, it becomes harder and harder as she moves into this far northern part of the world. And eventually, what happens is that in the winter, she falls over on her back. So now she's more defenseless. Her paws are up in the sky. Remember that again, that these are the paws, and this is the head of the bear. And then some of the birds that were trailing after the other hunters, because they're owls, they're a little bit heavier and harder to move. They start to disappear. They get lost, and so they disappear below the horizon. Same thing with the pigeon and the blue jay. They're lost to the sky. The 3 main hunters, again, this is the robin, the chickadee, and the moose bird. They stay very close in pursuit. And then finally, as we get into the depths of winter, the birds finally overtake the bear and cook the bear. So the bird that organizes the most is called the chickadee, carrying the pot on its back, whereas the robin is the hungriest of all the birds because the robin has been fasting all winter and is so eager for the bear that she becomes covered in blood. And so in order to escape this blood, what she does is she flies up to a maple tree in the sky, a celestial maple tree, and tries to shake the blood off that way. The blood, however, scatters all over the earth. So the trees in the autumn turn red for that reason. And the robin, as hard as he can try, he can't get the blood off of his chest. So the chickadee tells him that however long your name is Robin, you'll still carry that red mark on your chest of being the hungriest of all the hunters for the bear. But of course, nothing lasts forever, even the death of the bear. And then the spirit of the bear comes back every year into a new bear who emerges from the bear's den. And so as we move into spring, this great bear starts to rear up again towards the heavens. and we can see it as it moves from night to night. There's also another constellation nearby the Great Bear, which is the Den of the Bear. Now, in our Western astronomy, it's usually called the Northern Crown, but in the Mi'kmaq tradition, it's the Den of the Bear. And let me try to show that to you as well. So not far from the Great Bear is another constellation that is not risen yet, but here it is. So this constellation called the Northern Crown is one of those beautiful constellations that you can see in the springtime, if you ask my opinion, because it's very small and compact and looks just like a semicircle or a basket, and it represents the Den of the Bear. And it's very close to this star called Arcturus, or the Great Horned Owl in the Mi'kmaq tradition. So lots of peoples across North America saw a bear in this constellation, as did other peoples around the world. However, other groups did not. And so another Algonquian-speaking people who lived in North America, called the Ojibwe, who lived around the Great Lakes, instead of seeing a bear, what they saw was a fisher. So here's a drawing of the fisher. Now, a fisher in Ojibwe is called Ojig, and it represents a kind of mammal that hunts. So a bit like a badger or a weasel. It's a hunting animal that lives in the trees. It's a great and very agile hunter. And according to this Ojibwe story, the fisher starts off with a request from his son to bring back, as part of the hunt, bring back summer, because this family of the fisher has been suffering through a winter that has never ever ended. So what the fisher does is he sets off on a quest with lots of other animals, including the otter, the wolverine, the muskrat, and they go on a quest for summer. And to get to the summer, what they have to do is they have to climb to the tallest mountain in the world. So here, as we watch the fisher go through the seasons, he's climbing every year to the highest point of the sky. And then finally, through the effort of all these animals, they break through to the celestial realm, which is like Earth in some ways. According to both these traditions, the Earth is just like the heavens above, but the heavens are older and more beautiful, and in some ways. So they finally break through. They manage to release the birds of summer, who were trapped in pots up in the celestial land. And they bring the birds back to Earth. The birds bring the warm air of the heavens down to us. And so all the animals managed to escape, the wolverine, the otter. Unfortunately, the fisher, though, did not make it in time, because the fisher had one vulnerability, which is that although the arrows of the celestial people who were guarding the summer birds were not able to pass through any part of his body through his invulnerable fur, he had one spot on his tail, which was vulnerable to those arrows. And so that explains, if you look at the night sky, you can also see in the tail of the fisher, you can see a string of stars right here at the very tip of the Big Dipper, which is the tail of the fisher. And in a lot of ways, it's easier to see a fisher when you look at these stars in the night sky than it is to see a bear, because bears don't have great long tails like that.
And can you, William, show us what the night sky would look like, and add the grid and the dimensions that overlay in a man-made computer model?
Yeah, of course. So we see the Big Dipper and all these stars moving in a spiral through the night sky, or circle through the night sky. And so astronomers have made a kind of imaginary grid that you can overlay the whole night sky to kind of make sense of what it is. And people throughout the world, through various different cultures, have seen the sky as a sort of sphere that surrounds us, with all the stars being affixed to it. And so there's always been questions about what's on the other side, right? Some question, I think someone asked in the audience, like, why does the North Pole star never move? And that's because it's right at the center of this grid, this unchanging imaginary grid that is just marks out all the possible rotations of the night sky. Of course, you can't see the grid, but if you do go out every night, you will see the stars moving in a great big spiral like they are here.
And one of the things that we believe here in the Northeast part of the country is that stars are born in the East and they die in the West. And that there are some distinctive patterns that don't change, as William mentioned, from night to night. And that aided in navigation. Also, sometimes the stars fell from the sky, as we saw with the meteor shower. The moon appeared in a different place than the stars, and it changed shape from time to time. The appearance in the sky was regular, but sometimes it can be seen during the day. The moon and the sun can also turn colors. When we looked at it from this part of the country, it could turn dark red or black, and in addition to what looked like yellow. We also noticed that the significance of the Northeastern Native American side of this and the functionality and aspects of life that pertain to this, to the sky and what it relates to, moved across the night sky again from east to west, and it's set at a different location on the horizon. So that helped with ceremonies and traditions in different seasons and times of the year. There's also some distinctive clusters, as we've learned, and that not all stars all move together. There's different types. And as William is delineating here, we can see that that sky is made up of, even though they're very far away, we can still see things with our eyes. You can use telescopes and also binoculars if you're just starting out in the astronomy world. And it's very exciting and very rewarding to see what's available and how it impacts us and different cultures around the world and in our communities. So if there is anything else that you'd like to add at this time?
Yes, thank you so much, Mandy, for what you've said. Thank you so much for bringing these perspectives to us. I just would like to add 2 things if I can. So one thing is that the stars belong to everybody. Every culture in the world has legends, and they're part of human history as in addition to scientific objects. So they're part of our cultures, our stories. They all play out in the sky, whether it's the Greek and Roman myths, whether it's Chinese astronomy, whether it's all the hundreds of different Native American traditions. One thing I would just like to mention is an upcoming event that we're doing in next June. And that's about safeguarding the sky, make sure it is safe for future generations, that we can all enjoy it. And one of the big problems that we have today is light pollution, of course, which is caused by, as Mandy said, it's light coming from artificial sources. Another huge problem, though, that's starting and getting worse and worse is pollution in space itself. So satellites are overtaking the night sky and ruining some of the constellations that we can usually see. And so on June 8th, Montaukett Observatory and South Fork Natural History Museum is going to be hosting an event with Andy Lawrence, a professor from Edinburgh University, who's going to be talking about how to protect the night sky to make sure that we can all see it and enjoy it for generations to come. So I hope you can all enjoy it. Join us for that as well. And with that, I'm happy to just say thank you again to Mandy for all the work that you've done and organizing this, and for sharing your thoughts and views with us tonight, and all your scholarship. So it's been so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Same here. I enjoyed it immensely. It was an honor to be with you all this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. I have some questions still in the chat that I think we would all like to have an answer to. There's some curiosity from Scott Bluedorn. Is it possible that Fort Hill in Montauk could have been used as an observatory for the Montaukett people? Is there a significance in the landscape there? Have you heard NASA wants to mine the moon, and what do you think about that? So it seems like that's a question for both of you. So Mandy or William, whoever would like to address Scott's questions first.
I'll definitely let Mandy tackle the first question.
Well, it's always good to have an observatory, I think, that would reflect providing people with resources and more information to get to know the sky and the environment. I think that's a good idea.
And yeah, about the second question about mining on the moon, well, you know, I guess like anyone, I have 2 opinions about it. In a sense that the moon is very interesting. It has a lot of natural resources that we could probably use in benefits, but at the same time, it's also a beautiful and untouched world. And, you know, to me, mining doesn't always have the best reputation on Earth when it comes to its effects on the landscapes and things like that. So, you know, I don't have a strong opinion on it, because it doesn't seem to be happening imminently, but I would probably be hesitant to despoil the moon of its resources the way we've done on Earth. Yeah.
I think, Mandy, coming back to Scott's question, he meant in ancient times, long ago, were the Montauketts, is it possible, do you think, that they might have used Fort Hill, to gaze at the stars?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely think that's any high ground area and topography would have definitely been used to assist in all kinds of things, because you have to remember also too, where that's located, that's first contact. I mean, that's the end, that's where the ocean is. When anybody who was going to come into that area, that would be the first place and area logistically that people would come to. So it's at the furthest point. So it's a great elevation. I'm not sure how high it is or what the topography specifically looks like, but yeah, that would definitely have an impact on peoples of that time in that environment. Yes.
And
Thank you for that question.
Thank you. We have a question from Maurice Constantino, and he's asking, how are you seeing the sky through the clouds?
Oh,
Okay.
well, that's a great question. Over here in East Hampton, it seems to be raining, so not seeing too many stars tonight. I'm not sure where it is where you are, Mandy.
Well, anytime there's any distance, whether it's pollution, light pollution, or clouds, that always impacts what you can see in the night sky. Fog with the natural eye. Now, if you have instruments that can see beyond that, that might be a different story. Telescopes, binoculars, things of that nature. That's what I think. What do you think?
Well, clouds are pretty tricky for all of us. So even if we have a good telescope, the clouds will shut it right down. But there are other instruments like the Hubble Space Telescope that one reason they put it into space was to get it right beyond all those clouds. So
remember the geoid. All right, we're looking at the sky map that we showed you. You're looking at it from vehicles that are looking down on the Earth, like the astronauts that just landed in the water. They were looking down at the Earth.
So we have a question from Heidi. How come I don't see the stars in the sky anymore in New York City, but I see them in Woodland Hills, California? Do you guys still see the stars on Long Island?
I think either one of us can answer that question. No, go ahead, William. Pretty
yeah, we can still see the stars on Long Island, although we all have our challenges, and one part of Long Island is much closer to New York City than the other. So here, closer towards Montauk, where I live, the stars are beautiful and they're wonderful to go see, but everywhere struggles with light pollution from cities and from suburbs and from everywhere. So it's something we should all be conscious about.
And also, now that we learned a little bit more about some of those brighter stars, and we know now that the white stars and the blue stars are the brightest, maybe we'll look for them in the future out in the constellations and in the sky. In the night sky, we can, sometimes if you don't know what you're looking for, some of the novice astronomers and people who want to learn more about the sky, sometimes we have challenge knowing what we're looking at because we think it's so vast and so difficult and so much to see. So some suggestion on how to approach that. Do you have an approach to that, William, for people who want to learn more about the night sky? Where to start?
Yeah, one place I always recommend people start with is learning the constellations. So learning the patterns, like the Big Dipper, like Orion, but adding your own flair to it, because like I said, all those patterns are from different cultural traditions, and like they connect stars in different ways. So if you find a story from another cultural tradition that means more to you, then learn about where to find that in the night sky can be a great place to start. Because for me personally, learning the constellations from the book by H.A. Ray that you mentioned in your talk was a great place to start, because it was very accessible. And after I read that, I was really able to see a lot of the constellations. I was able to see a bear there where I had just seen a bunch of stars before. So learning to see those patterns and learning how to memorize them and learn the stories connected with them really Oh, someone asked, what's the book? It's called The Stars by H.A. Rey. He was the same author who wrote Curious George, but he was a great astronomer, and so he wrote this wonderful book explaining how to see the constellations. But that's a good place to start. Another book that you mentioned in your talk, Mandy, was a book by Dorcas Miller, which we both did a lot of research with that was helpful. It's called Stars of the First People. And so this book also has a lot of great constellation maps in it. And it draws stories not just only from the Greco-Roman tradition, that the stars are officially named after nowadays, but also from hundreds of different Native American cultures from across North America. So that's a great book.
The other thing that I would add to that, for those people who are interested, don't lose the stories of your elders. Your elders know a lot about this particular area, and sometimes you just have to ask and be patient when they want to discuss this with you, with how they fished, how they stored food, how they lived in the hollow of a tree before they built the house, or how they knew where to put the foundation of a house so you wouldn't get flooded out, where to find fish. Now that a lot of the streams are dried up and houses are built on top, how do you survive and live a healthy lifestyle based on the ground and the aquifer that you have available to you? So speak to those elders. Speak to people who are still around that can tell us those stories and pass those things down, and we'll learn a lot.
So we have time for a few more questions. Can you see the bird constellation right now? That's from Julia M.
Oh, the Ojibwe, that's what she's referring to.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
The Ojibwe constellation. So I can share the screen again if you want to see that. There were a few constellations that the Ojibwe called after birds, I believe. So there's a beautiful constellation called the Crane. And let me bring up the Ojibwe name. I'm not sure how to pronounce this, so I won't disrespect it by trying to. But it's a beautiful crane. And actually in the night sky, you can see this very easily, because in Greek mythology it was also a bird. It was a swan, Cygnus. And so in the springtime or the summer, it forms, it's high overhead. And it's part of the summer triangle, which is these three bright stars, which Mandy talked a lot about. Vega, which is one of them. This is called Deneb, and this is called Altair. But this beautiful bird flies right across the Milky Way. So again, lots of cultures have seen a similar type of pattern here. In this case, a crane, and in Greece, it was a swan. But there are some other birds too. For instance, where the Greeks and Romans saw a little bear, Ursa Minor, the Ojibwe people saw a constellation called the Loon, another type of bird. And I know that the Mi'kmaq people saw this particular shape as three people in a canoe right here. 3 hunters in a canoe, and they're all, yeah, there's so many different traditions that you can look for in the night sky. So I've only shared just a very few of them. There's so many more that you can research and learn about from all different peoples across.
Yeah, there's also one about the turtle. Have you heard that one? How the earth was created on the back of a turtle. I'm sure you heard about that story before.
Well, I would say that I would love to hear more about it from you, Mandy.
Next time.
Okay.
That story is also in the book by Dorcas Miller, I believe, for anybody who'd like to read. There are many stories. So do I have time for a few more comments and questions? From Hildy, speaking to Mandy's point. Hildy says, I enjoyed this. It made me think about my grandpa and how he planted his garden. And let me see. Oh, someone should draw the stories of the sky from a Montaukett viewpoint. That's from Julia again. If anyone's out there listening and would like to do that, we would love to see it.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah,
definitely. So do I pick the Northeastern sky, so we learn a little bit more about that. I know it's out there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One more comment from Eileen Parker. When I moved to Georgia from New York, I wondered where the stars went or very few. Now I know why, due to pollution. Smiling moon. Somebody's asking about the smiling moon. And did native people use the sky to navigate the sea?
Absolutely. Whalers, fisher people, absolutely.
Here, I had hoped there would be more talk about the sky and its effects on animals from smiling moon.
Yeah, the deer, the turtles, the horseshoe crab, they're all impacted by our environment these days too. We can have possibly a series on just the animals and how that's affected them over time. And there's seasonal migrations as well. Your birds, your bees, they're all impacted by our environment and by the tides and the suns and the seasons. It's all connected. As I said in the beginning, it's all, nature is alive and it's all connected. Thank you for that question. Yes, thank you, Smiling Moon.
I think those are the questions that are visible to me. There are many thank yous and applause and much appreciation from everyone here to both of you. So I can't thank you enough, and I hope we'll continue this discussion at some point. There are many, many things that are important to all of us if we want our planet to survive, and if we want to understand one another better and to learn from our elders. And I would love to hear more about the babies being born, according to the moon and the constellations, and how you find your markers by the sun. So we have a lot still to talk about, and I hope that we will have an opportunity to gather together one more time. And I enjoyed everything, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you both for all your vigilance and your hard work and coming together on this to talk about the Native American culture and give us a broader perspective of the way our earth is seen and the knowledge throughout the ages that's being passed down that we should not forget, that we need to learn, many of us, for the first time. So thank you for giving a voice to all that. Thank you, William.
Thank the ancestors as well.
Yeah, the ancestors as well. And the things that live inside you that were passed down to you from generation to generation.
Thank you all.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much. That was
Thank you
all.
so much, Mandy, and thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, William. Bye, Jack.
Bye. Bye, Mandy. Bye, William. Bye,
Bye,
Lauren.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone in the audience.
Thank you, everybody.